Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new webinar. Today, we're here with attorney Ruby Powers from Powers Law Group, and we're going to talk about the best practices for affirmative asylum. So Ruby, she is a board-certified international immigration and nationality attorney, and she has been licensed since 2008 and founded the firm in November of 2009. So Ruby, the word is yours.
Thank you, Maria. So we wanted to talk about affirmative asylum because, you hear a lot about it in the news. It's really an important topic. And here in the United States, we allow people to apply. And it really is a complicated process. We have a very high approval rate. We've represented people affirmatively, which means with the asylum office, and defensively in immigration court, and around the country, in fact. And I've flown to Boston, Virginia, New Orleans. We have clients all over, Houston, obviously, where we're based. We've actually represented people from 47 different countries applying for asylum here in the United States. And so you can see that we don't have just one country that we represent, but we have clients from all over the world. And so the basics of asylum, and this can be helpful for those who are in immigration court as well, but today we're focusing on affirmative asylum. But a lot of overlap is that you have to prove that you have suffered persecution in the past, or you have reasonable fear of future persecution. So past or future, and on account of, which is connecting to one of 5 grounds, which is the race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, and political opinion. In Spanish, a lot of people call this asilo político, thinking that it's mostly political related, but it isn't. There's all these 5 different grounds. So what that basically means is that if somebody is targeting you and you can't get help, and the police won't be able to protect you, but you are in danger, you had past persecution, and or you're fearful of the future because of something similar that happened to someone else like you, that based off one of these 5 grounds, then you could potentially have a good claim. Now, the basics of asylum, that there's nowhere else for you to relocate in your home country, that there's nowhere in the world for you to relocate, so you don't have any other valid citizenships or visas, and that when you applied within 1 year of entry, or that you are in status up until the time you apply. There are some exceptions and changed circumstances, and that you must be physically in the United States when you apply. Now, there is a 1-year filing that I sort of went over briefly, but basically, if you have taken more than a year since your entry to apply for asylum, then you need to have a changed circumstances, where it was a change in the law, changes in the country conditions, or maybe there was a relationship. Maybe you got divorced and you have to have your own file because your spouse was the primary applicant. Other examples could be extraordinary circumstances like a disability or extreme illness, death of legal representation, or maintain a status. For example, if you were in an F1 status and then you apply 5 years later after you've been in F1 for a long time, those 5 years, then that's still fine. You can do that. The burden of proof is on the applicant, which means you, and the standard of proof satisfaction to the Attorney General. So you need to make sure that you do a good job proving that. Now, what are the general steps? Because this is a very brief overview. And again, this doesn't take the place of legal advice. This is just more information. That you arrive in the US, you analyze your eligibility. Some people know when they're coming that they're applying for asylum soon after. Some people don't know because things change, and then they find out after they leave. So if they've decided to apply and they have a good case, depending on that level of how much they want to go forward, then they could apply. Once you get the receipt after applying that says that your case is pending, then you might get requested for fingerprinting. Very likely you will, especially if it's the first time you've ever applied for anything with USCIS. Then they're going to do some background checks. You will eventually receive an interview notice. Now, again, this is going to take a long time. We are under this thing called last in, first out. And that means LIFO, last in, first out. That means that if you apply today, you're supposed to get an interview right away. But the thing is that they have so many people in the backlog and so many people applying, it's really hard to keep up with that. So when will you get an interview? Nobody will know, because there's people from 2015 and 16 who are still waiting to get an interview. There's people who apply now and are getting an interview really quickly. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, even though they've explained it to us. So we can tell you you need to be ready at any moment, but you might wait many years. Once you get that interview notice, you're going to be given usually about 3 weeks notice to prepare for your interview. If you, right now, according to the Asylum Office, they told us that they're giving 45 days for those who have had an asylum application pending a very long time and are getting their first interview for the first time. So that gives them a little more time to prepare and update their application, which is very out of date. So at the interview, we'll go over that a little bit more, but that's when it could be a couple hours long. The officer asks lots of detailed questions, goes over the application and your statement, and then they'll determine whether you're approved or not, or if it goes to the immigration court, and then eventually you'll receive your decision. So in a really short nutshell, this is the process. Now, when we submit applications, you can apply online or via paper. If you apply over paper filing, then you want, regardless, either way, you want to have a lot of the biographical information like marriage certificate, birth certificate, terminations of previous marriages to establish your relationship with the individual. At the fingerprint appointment, they're going to be checking for your security, but they're going to take a photo of you and get your fingerprints. It's important to go to your date that they give you, and there are some times you can go early, but if you have to reschedule, it's important to know, otherwise they'll think you abandon your case. Now, when you do get that interview notice, you want to make sure that you review the application closely. If there's any additional evidence you want to submit, you generally want to submit that information before you attend the interview so that the officer can review it closely before they see you for the first time. Now, there's only a handful of asylum offices around the nation, and there's a lot of sub-offices, and sometimes they do circuit rides, which basically means that the asylum officers go to your city that doesn't have an asylum office for certain meetings. Then the other thing to note is that that you can also that they can have that what I mentioned about before was about LIFO, is that they have the last in, first out. So there's a different priority list. The applicants that were scheduled for an interview, but the interview had to be rescheduled. The second is those who have a pending 21 days or less. And the third, those other pending will be scheduled starting with newer filings. But actually right now they're focusing on what they call the OAWs, which is those from Afghanistan that were qualified to be deemed the OAW. Now, to prepare for the interview, you want to make sure that you've reviewed the whole file, that you have the documents you need to establish who you are and to back up your story. You want to make sure that you have reviewed your application, you have the requisite birth certificate, marriage, death, divorce, whatever documents to establish who you are. And also on the interview date, you're going to want to bring everybody who's included in the application. So that could be spouse and children, even if they're over 21, because they might have been under 21 at the time you submitted the application. And as long as they didn't get married, they can still be under your application. So you want to make sure that everything that you show the officer has an English translation, a certified English translation, because if not, then they won't be able to read it. So continuing to prepare that interview, you want to look at the overstatement, you want to review the application, see if there's any edits you need to make. Make a list of edits or have them prepared in advance to make the officer's life easier so that you can smoothly go over the application. Double check the translations were done right. Make sure that they are certified. They don't have to have what I call wax ribbon, seal, or notarized. They just need to say it's a true and accurate translation from whatever language to English, and the person's bilingual, and that they've verified it's a true, accurate translation. To see what needs to be updated since it was filed, to make sure that everything is provided as much as possible to the officer. And then what we do is we simulate a we simulate a mock interview, and we make sure that you know what to expect so that you're not hearing the questions or you're not going through the process for the first time. And so that can put your mind at ease and you could focus on what's really important, answering those questions. So I describe it as the three major sections of the asylum interview. One, the application review. After you've basically done your oath and established who you are and said you are. Two is your review of the statement and story. And then three are security questions. Now, sometimes they'll do the security questions early with all the family in the room, and then they'll let the family go and sit in the waiting room so they don't fill up the whole room the whole time. They don't have to, especially if there's little kids and having to stay quiet and listen the whole time. For the most part, this is how they break it down. I will say if you come prepared on the application review, it shouldn't take that long, but if you're not prepared and there's a lot of edits, then it can be very cumbersome. If the statement story, yeah, you've already prepared and you've already submitted it, but if you haven't, you have to tell your story in your own words. And so the officer is going to ask you to basically say the same thing or ask those questions in live. And so that's why it's important for you to know. And security questions are a lot of questions about like, where have you traveled to for business, pleasure, or what was the purpose, when was it? And then also a lot of questions about like military intelligence and things like that. So we've in general, officers will say these are the red flags if the things that could be a problem if there's a delay in the filing, like you didn't file it soon after you entered the country. If the statement is not really clear, doesn't make a lot of sense, if there's inconsistency in the timeline, as if it doesn't, like, why did you do this and then do that? Like, what, or if there's some inconsistencies that don't make sense in the timeline. If you came to the US and then you went back to your home country, and then you came back to the US and then applied, you really have to work hard to explain why you did that, because otherwise it's not going to, they're going to really question, when did your fear start? And if you did have the fear, then why did you return home? Travel to suspect countries. Well, there's a couple of countries that they have more suspicion over. So if you go to those countries, you really have to explain what you were doing there, and it could make your backlog a little bit longer on the security checks. And then not having a clear nexus means like that there's not a clear connection between what happened to you or you're afraid of and one of the 5 protected grounds. If it's sort of like just general violence and you happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, but it wasn't because your political beliefs or your religious beliefs or your race or whatever, then they would say that that does not have a clear nexus, which is sort of like a fancy word for law, but not having connection. Now, our clients, we want to help as many people as we can, but if you're if these things happen, then this can cause problems with the officer. So like if you don't answer the question or you don't answer it in order, like I will tell you, having done this a lot, American thought is very chronological. So if you are creative, sort of like what we would call like an international independent film movie, and you answer in different orders and don't answer the story in chronological order, that will not be really well liked because they're just thinking in order. And I understand this, having worked with lots of people from around the world. Not every culture has the same mindset. Demeanor is important. They want to make sure that you have a good demeanor. If you're like aggressive or like that could be problematic. Body language is important, especially because when you're not talking the same language, they're reading your body language, nonverbal cues, and we need to make sure there's a good translation. You're supposed to bring your own interpreter, and then they have a monitor to make sure that it's accurate. Then the decision is usually that you are approved or they're going to send you to immigration court. The processing times is really long. Back in the day, they used to say you can come in and pick up the decision within 2 weeks, but they're not, I don't think they're doing that anywhere in the country right now. So that used to be, that the wait times is because they're understaffed and lots of files and there's a lot of background checks. So that's what we understand at the moment. So this was a brief overview of asylum. It's hard to sort of get it contained in just a short amount of time, but we hope that this was helpful for you. We have a lot of different ways you can reach us through Facebook, Twitter, X, newsletter, Instagram, TikTok, and we do a lot of videos. You can check us out for reels, shorts, TikTok videos, what have you. You can reach us at rubypowerslaw.com and also at our phone number, 713-589-2085. We have lots of different access to other languages. All the attorneys speak Spanish, and we're going to provide this in Spanish as well. If this was helpful, please share it, subscribe, and let other people know about it. And we hope that we can be of help for you in the future. Later this month, we're going to be talking about how to obtain U.S. citizenship through naturalization, the military parole in place, and what is a national interest waiver, and how do you obtain it. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.